Hello to everybody who are joining us online this morning, and people are filtering into the room. For the people in the room, I'll just point out the two big cameras at the back of the room. If you put your head in the cameras, you're online. So I just wanted to say welcome to everybody, and a quick thanks again to our conference sponsors, CGI and Astroscale, for a lovely evening last night. If I'm a bit hoarse, it's from, yes, at the St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, an absolutely spectacular space. If anybody's in Coventry, you have to stop by there, but magical with the Christmas trees up, etc. So for those of you joining us online, I'm very, very sorry that you couldn't join us for that evening. But after all these years of not meeting in person, being able to actually talk to members of the network in person over a glass of bubbles was just a real treat. So thanks for that. We had a really packed agenda yesterday. We have a very packed agenda again today. And I am delighted to say that we are topping and tailing the conference today with two science ministers, a former science minister of the UK, and the closing today with the current science minister of the UK. So we're very, very fortunate to have an opening keynote from Lord David Willetts, who was the Minister for Universities and Science from 2010 until July 2014. He also is the president of the Resolution Foundation, but today he's speaking to us in his capacity as the chair of the board of the UK Space Agency. But David, any other of your immense insights that you'd like to share from your very stellar career in science and industry, please feel free to share those. So without any further ado, over to you, Lord Willetts.
Katherine, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm only sorry that I can't be with you in person, especially after I've just heard about your event last night. But thanks for letting me join in online. And I would congratulate you, because I think what GNOSIS does in raising attention and drawing attention to the whole issue of sustainability in space is crucial. And we try to support that through the UK Space Agency. I should also mention that I'm on the board of UKRI, and the research councils there also help and support space sustainability, including in the most practical way by helping fund some of the work that GNOSIS does. And we all know the power of the key concept behind GNOSIS, that we think of space as somehow pure or pristine or clear, and yet we're in danger of trashing it and making it into yet another man-made rubbish dump. And we are very concerned as well about access to space in future, if space debris makes launching missions in future trickier and trickier. And for me, talking to Tim Peake, our astronaut in the space station, he will say in some ways the scariest thing he did, not the launch, not the return, is the times when in the space station they had to go into their Soyuz modules in case space debris damaged the space station itself. So yeah, this is really important. Now, let me just briefly review some of the things we're doing in the UK and turn to the main issues that we face. For me personally, one of the things that was a frustration from which we have since learned is that we were very keen to look at ways in which we could improve the global framework of space law around sustainability and debris removal. And of course, we still have only one international treaty, the original Outer Space Treaty of 1967, to which the UK was one of the original guarantor signatories alongside the USA and what was then the USSR. And I can remember our thinking as we were approaching the 50th anniversary of the Outer Space Treaty, whether this was an opportunity to do a proper review and upgrade and modernize the overall international legal framework within which we operate. But the advice I got back was very frank and very depressing, that the state of relations, particularly even then between the USA and Russia, was such that we were unlikely to be able to make any progress if we tried to work with others and convene a 50th anniversary review and update. So that approach didn't work. But since then, we have tried other approaches. And look, again, GNOSIS has played a crucial part in this, which have, I think, made real progress. I'm proud of the role that we played leading up to the 2020 UN resolution, which in some ways was our substitute, our new initiative after we realized that the big opportunity of the 50th anniversary review was not going to work. And the UN, we all paid tribute, and I think you've got someone from the UN speaking today, we all pay tribute to the significance which the UN is now placing on this work. And then when the UK hosted the G7 at Cornwall in 2021, similarly, we put space debris and space sustainability on the agenda, and we're very pleased that there was a significant shared statement then. And in the space strategy, published later that year, and we at the UK Space Agency are charged with implementing the space strategy. One of the key points at in our space strategy for the UK is that we should contribute to and try to lead a global effort to make space sustainable. So we are committed to trying to make a really positive contribution to this agenda. And most recently, at the ESA Ministerial, again, the UK played a key part in contributing to major ESA programs, Vigil, ADRIOS, COSMIC, all of which are important for space sustainability. And I have to say, my friend and successor, George Freeman, who will be speaking to you later today, I think he played a really good, constructive role at the ESA Ministerial. He's the person who negotiated and set those British contributions, which for those specific programs add up to over 100 million euros. And I'm sure he will be wanting later on today to take you through the approach he's leading for the UK in ESA. So I won't go into further detail now. Let me just briefly review 4 strands of work, and then, of course, I hope there'll be time for questions and comments. First of all, there is space weather, and understanding space weather better, which of course Vigil is crucial for that, is very important. And again, from my own personal experience as a minister, the first time that because of the cycle of Carrington events, about every 11 or 12 years, we'd got 2011, 2012 marked down as a potential peak period for solar activity. And when we were planning for the London Olympics in 2012 and had a risk register of the things that could go wrong, you know, from a terrorist attack to a mass transportation failure, very high on our list of risks was space weather, space weather events inhibiting our ability to communicate in and from the games to the global audience. It was quite high on that risk register, and it brought home to us the vulnerabilities of our satellite systems to space weather. And actually, we got away quite lightly during that peak of Carrington events. We thought there wasn't any solar activity. We now stand a bit better that there was, but it wasn't coming the Earth's way. But understanding that phenomenon better and giving us the proper advance and warning we need to be able to, as a minimum, turn our satellites away and perhaps switch them off temporarily is really important. So there's the space weather strand. The secondly, developing space situational awareness. And of course, we're in the rather odd position in the UK that we've got at Fylingdales really a really important capability there, but it's ultimately under the US military. And so there are limits to the ways in which that data can be used. What we're now trying to do and developing is a plan for proper access to space situational data that will be available for no charge to any space organizations and companies using the UK as a launch state or with their satellites licensed in the UK. So as the world is now innovating fast on space situational awareness, we really want to play our part and make sure there is a reliable, high quality free service available for satellites that we have licensed and for people using the UK as a launch state. Then let me turn to other strands. There is active debris removal, and Adrias 1 is very interesting and exciting. We have resubscribed to that at ESA last week. We see this as a really exciting area for British technology. I used to be on the board of Surrey Satellites, and there the visionary Martin Sweeting was, we at Surrey Satellites were involved in the early days in active space debris removal. I sometimes think, well, some of these devices, harpoons and nets, you feel you're back in the Roman amphitheater or something, as people describe the different technologies they're developing. And at the moment, there's a lot of attention on what ClearSpace is doing and their kind of claw technology. And we hope to see that thriving, supported by ESA and by the UK. Of course, let's face it, one of the tricky issues here is some of these are dual-use technologies, and we understand the sensitivity around that. We do have to be careful, but we see these and are absolutely focused on them as exclusively civil programs and believe that's the way they should be approached globally. And then, as well as that, of course, there is, I think in the future, in-orbit servicing. I suspect in the future, there will be more and more capacity to repair broken or malfunctioning satellites, to help ensure that they continue to serve and do their work. And Astroscale is another really exciting company now with a big presence in Oxfordshire, moving beyond active debris removal into in-orbit servicing as well. And we see that as another area where British companies and where we really are keen to attract companies around the world. And we hope they find the UK a very favorable environment for that. And of course, then eventually we will have our own UK launch capabilities. And we're not going to be launching massive SpaceX style rockets. But when we look at our capacity, both with Virgin Orbit launching from Newquay in Cornwall, and also probably next year we will start seeing some launches from the north of Scotland out north towards the pole. We see those as very much opportunities for smaller rockets for satellites and other services in a niche area. And it's an absolutely ideal way if you want to launch some in-orbit servicing capability, if you want to put up a particular satellite to get it into a particular location. We see our space launch capabilities as really helping tackle some of those challenges of space debris removal and in-orbit servicing. So I think in all, if you put all that together, I hope there's a sense that the UK is really trying to make a constructive contribution to a global problem. We're trying to do it through technologies. We're trying to do it through international activity. We're trying to do it by making the UK a clear leader in shaping responsible space law. And let me just end by that observation. So look, I'm not a scientist. I'm not with a background in space engineering. I don't claim to understand the science and the technology in any detail. But I think the whole challenge of sustainability in space and space debris removal cannot simply be left to the technical experts, the scientists and the engineers, wonderful though they are. There's a wider role here because we're talking about public opinion. we're talking about legal frameworks, we're talking about cultural pressures on companies and organizations to use space properly. We're talking about a legal framework in which the space should be accessible to all nations. We're talking about improving and learning perhaps from the law of the sea, improving the legal framework that makes debris removal possible. And when I think of the fantastic experts at places like the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, somewhere else where the UK tries to make a contribution, it's clear to me that this is an area, like so much else of space, where the engineers and the scientists can work with the lawyers, with the campaigners, with the political leaders to ensure that space in future is sustainable. Katherine, thank you very much. And I hope that helps set off this day's conference.
Thank you. And that's actually a great overview of the topics that we're talking about today and have been talking about over the last day. I really appreciate your willingness to take some questions. Can I please encourage anybody online to put their questions in the Q&A function on the webinar? And we have had one question come in online, but I'm just going to ask if anybody in the room has a question first. I'm going to give you the mic.
Hello, Lord Willetts. Thank you very much. My name's Nick Ross. I'm from Naiparo Company. Fascinated with what you just said, that last bit. I've just recently, my background's in astrophysics, but recently have a space law master's degree. I know the UK Space Agency very well. I'm keen to just ask your opinion or get your thoughts on how or should the UK Space Agency kind of be funding more legal or non-technical, dare I say it, sustainable challenges that are related to space. And if not UK Space Agency, maybe who should be taking the lead there in the UK?
Well, that's the answer is that we try to fund this in several ways, partly through significant ESA contributions. We do have national capability and some national funding in the space agency, and as one of the 10 we have a 10 goal space strategy, and as one of them is to try to contribute and make an effort to make space sustainable. It would be within, if there was something very high value and impactful, it would fall within our terms of reference, if you like, to fund it. And I'm also on the board of UKRI, and UKRI through its research councils also funds a wide range of activities. So if there is something where there's a clear public benefit and where private finance on its own is not sufficient, there is nothing in the terms of reference of either the space agency or the research councils that would automatically rule out funding for it. So it would be considered, and there'd be no barriers to our funding it if it met our criteria.
Can I ask a follow-up myself, David? Part of what we struggle with as a network is that actually these complex problems that we're trying to tackle, understanding the space environment better, looking for new techniques and technologies that will allow us to monitor the situation in space and to share that information more widely. It's a cross-disciplinary challenge.
Yep.
And current funding structures do tend to be a little more ring-fenced than that. So, you know, with your UCRI hat on, is there anything that you can say to encourage the researchers amongst our audience, you know, to try and collaborate cross disciplines in order to tackle these challenges? Where do they look for funding for that?
It's interesting. It's slightly, it's a very important point you're making, but it's also slightly frustrating for me because UKRI was created in 2017 to bring together the different research councils within a single entity, so as to make interdisciplinary working around, you know, big national and global challenges much easier than in the past. And so one of the main things we try to do at UKRI is break down those barriers. And that's why my answer to the question from Nick Ross is there shouldn't be anything that stands in the way of cross-disciplinary working. But look, if you guys, I mean, we have fixed budgets, there are always financial constraints. If there is some particular proposal that you would like to have considered on a cross-disciplinary basis, we at the UK Space Agency would happily look at it, and wearing my other hat as being on the board of UKRI, I'd happily see if there's any way in which UKRI can look at it as well.
Lord Willetts, you lit the blue touch paper there, right? So I just wanted to make a point to you. Yeah, so Don Polacco, the University of Warwick, we have met before at Jodrell Bank, where you announced 100K for SKA, and I'm doing this is my other part of my job, but I was talking about Plato.
Yes, I remember.
Submission, yeah. And I got to say to everyone, I was really impressed because he phoned me from his car. Right now, remember, this is an economist, and he phoned me from his car, and I gave him a 101 on exoplanet detection, and then he spouted it out, and it was really impressive, right? I've got, and that's like, anyway, that's not what I'm asking you, right? So the question is, right now, debris is not covered by any research council, right? And I'm not asking for money. I'm asking, in your role, which is an influential role on UKRI, make it the responsibility of a research council. That's all. Don't create money. I'm happy to compete for it. But right now, I'm serious, I am. We do good science. I'm happy to compete for it. Right now, we have to go through knowledge exchange schemes and all kinds of convoluted routes to try and get funded to do it. And that's why there is so little research on debris being done in universities at the moment. Thank you.
Well, that's a very, look, I'm learning. This is a really interesting point. I think it is possible that in the current regime, making it the responsibility of an individual research council may not be the best way of solving your problem. I can see there's a problem. You guys are persuading me there's a problem. There are different ways in which we should tackle it. And part of what we try to do at UKRI is actually get different research councils to work together. And I presume that, you know, the Arts and Humanities Research Council that funds jurisprudence and things is as relevant as EPSRC, Engineering and Physical Sciences, doing the engineering side. But look, I will take delivery of this point. It's a very fair point. I will see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
I have tried for about 4 years. Since this network started, that's what we've been trying to do. And we could have done it in 5 minutes.
Right. Okay.
You know, I'll just add to that. There was some discussion yesterday with debris removal that we haven't necessarily, and the new FCC regulations about deorbiting in 5 years instead of 25 years, what we haven't seen much science around is whether there's genuinely any terrestrial environmental impact of all these materials hitting the Earth's atmosphere. And that's another area that doesn't seem to really, it falls between a couple of different stools because it's environmental, probably DEFRA's problem, you know, but it doesn't really have clear ownership. So there's very little research going on in that area. I'm going to turn to the question online, which is a bit more specific, give you a bit of a breather. The question is that as Fylingdales has some limitations on access to data, what is the vision for how SSA data will be made available to all UK operators? And I would just expand that and say operators and researchers both have an interest in that data.
Yeah, and what we have developed is, of course, also the operational center at High Wycombe, and I'm trying to remember, I think at the Space Agency we have a budget line. I think it's modest, but I think we put kind of £4 or £5 million a year into ensuring that the data that is available for us is then made available for the categories I described. People with satellites licensed here, or indeed using the UK as a launch state. What I don't know is the terms on which that data is made available to researchers as distinct from entities actively in space. But that's another good question, which I will take delivery of. So researcher access to that information. Very fair question. I don't want to give a wrong answer in my early months as chair of the Space Agency, and I'm really finding this interesting. That's action point. That's query 2 to follow up on.
Sorry, my name is Phil Buckley. I work for a company called the PSC, who are actually working on that for the UK Space Agency. I'm sorry to say there is no researcher access yet to it, but it is something we're thinking about and we'd love to do.
Very useful. Thank you. Very interesting. Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. There you go. Question answered for you. You can tick that one off your list. Good to know. And
well, it's an action point. Now, look, as I say, I mean, this is really helpful, and you wanted a proper Q&A. It's a second issue that I'm very happy to follow up afterwards. Let's look into that issue of on what terms it might be possible to ensure some kind of research access. We are spending public money on this, and look, one of the principles I've always tried to apply in research is if it's publicly funded activity, then that data should then subsequently, unless there's some key security issue, then be publicly available.
thank you. And we do have Angus Stewart joining us this afternoon for our 2:15 session, and I think he is now the lead on this at the UK Space Agency. So if anybody wants to ask him more specific questions later, that's you're also welcome to do that. We have had another question come in online. The question is there a vision to add more sovereign detection and tracking capability?
Well, on that, I think there's not much that I can add to what I said earlier. We have created this entity at High Wycombe. There is a budget. We are trying to ensure that there is a free service available to UK users and query, potentially UK researchers. I think other countries, there was a wide European initiative, which post-Brexit we're not able to participate in. But we're developing and funding such capability.
Will Feline from DSTL. Just to expand on some of the previous answers, I'm involved with the National Space Operations Centre programme, which is joint CIV-MIL, and I believe the aspiration is certainly to share data wherever possible. The idea is, it's not a mature concept, but the idea is to share a whole of data at a variety of classifications and make it available where possible at the appropriate classification. And certainly I would personally support making data available to researchers, etc. I think that's a win. On the sovereign sensors, yes, there's definitely an aspiration to develop UK sovereign sensors, and DSTL is supporting Space Command and Space Agency at the moment in looking into low maturity, low TRL development of those.
Thank you very much, Will. Lord Willetts, I know we only had you booked till 9:30, and even though, once again, all the clocks in the room are saying different times, my P&T signal on my personal device is telling me that we've run a minute over, and I'm sure that the people in the room and online would continue to have the dialogue if we could allow it. But allow me just to say thank you very much for giving us your time, and it's been an excellent start to the day. I'm sure lots of conversations are going to flow from this over the course of the day. So thank you once again, and thanks from everybody in the room here.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, very useful. Thank you.